Hey guys, Charlie Murphy here. Thank you for choosing my video. We're playing yet another session of 1-2 No Limit 6 Max Tables on Ignition. The games are already up and running, so we'll jump right into the action. Upper right hand table, we have a player limp under the gun. We'll go ahead and isolate from the button using something like our cutoff raise first in range, including King Jack offsuit. We do that, and he goes ahead and calls, then leads into us for half pot on the King high flop. We've got top pairs, so we're not going anywhere. We'll go ahead and call that. Lower right-hand table, multi-way with an in-position player will be checking our range. Recreational player continues betting. That 9 of hearts completes a straight, which we, however, do have a block or two, and also the gut shot draw with our jack. There's a double flush draw out there. We've got top pair plus that gut shot straight draw. Nothing to do but go ahead and call against that half pot lead. River, not the best card for us, as it puts an overcard out there and closes the flush. However, he stops betting, he checks. I think this is a spot to go ahead and check back. We're not trying to get called by a worse king or a weaker pair on a particularly scary card that completes all kinds of flushes, and straights are also possible, and the ace is already out there. We were against a king that we dominated. He also had the flush draw, so his hand was not that weak, but we were still ahead of him. And we pick up the pot with our pair of kings. Upper right-hand table will open from the cutoff with Queen 6 suited. It's about the worst queen I would open from that spot. I think I would raise Queen 6 or better and fold Queen 5 or worse. Recreational player calls us from the big blind, and he goes ahead and check to us. We'll put in a small range bet on that 9-6-5 two-tone flop. Upper left-hand table, we raise blind on blind, and we get 3-bet. We're holding the ace-5 suited. Probably a regular type player, and this is a very loose formation, so we can actually go ahead and defend our suited aces here for a call. Check to him. The recreational player check calls the flop, then leads into us for pot on the turn. Given his large size, and I'm inclined to go ahead and lay this down. If he bets smaller, I would continue. With that pot size bet, I think it's weighted more towards strength. Upper left-hand table, a continuation bets half pot. We don't really have too much in the way of decent backdoor draws, so I'm going to go ahead and check fold that one. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise King-Queen first in from middle position, part of about a 21% raise first in range, and lower right-hand table, blind on blind, we'll raise the Jack-10. Use about a 45% open range there as a standard. Lower left-hand table, the small blind calls, get an ace-high flop, ace-9-8 rainbow. We'll go ahead and range bet small. Lower right-hand table, get a 3x open from middle position. We were on the button with ace-8 suited, and I don't need to be 3-betting all my suited aces in that spot, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold that one, with or without the overcall, or making it a squeeze situation. Lower left-hand table, we get check call. The turn is the king, gives us second pair. I'd be using overbets or checks on this particular texture, and a hand like King-Queen, second pair, top kicker is firmly in the check-back camp. He checks again. It may be a little on the thin side because he should probably have a lot of ace-x there, but I think I'm going to go ahead and actually try to sneak a value bet in here. I will be value cutting myself some portion of the time where he's got a hand like ace-jack that's just never folding. But I want to have some value in there. It's a little on the thinner side to balance off all the bluffs I'm going to be bluffing with on the river that I'm not surrendering. And it's okay to value bet thin and value cut yourself sometimes. I'm going to be cautious value betting the kings in that spot there just because I think this guy can have a lot of ace-x in that particular spot. And he does have ace-10, but like I said, that's okay. Sometimes you value cut yourself. The fact that he's calling a raise out of the small blind with ace-10 offsuit, that also tells me he's likely a recreational player. So we're going to go ahead and put a tag on him. We get squeezed by the big blind from under the gun on that lower left-hand table. It should be a pretty tight formation, especially with the squeeze situation. I can be very tight and even tighter because I'm not closing the action with that overcaller out there that can call behind me or back jam. And I think pocket eights is a very easy fold in that situation. Upper left-hand table, 10-8 suited, is just outside of standard under the gun open range for me, so I'll go ahead and fold that. Upper right-hand table, we're in the small blind. We get a 2.5x open from the button. Pocket 5 is right on the cusp, really just barely inside the range of hands I'm going to 3-bet here, so I'll go ahead and raise him up. We get called, an ace-9-3 two-tone flop. I'm going to go ahead and put in a small range bet. Lower right-hand table, get a 3x open from the button. Queen-9 suited, in my opinion, is just outside a range you should be defending there, so I'm going to go ahead and fold against that size. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind, Jack-8 suited versus a 3x open is going to be a standard defense towards the bottom of the range, but very reasonable hand to call with. He's been a little on the loose passive side so far, which means he might not be as aggressive as he's supposed to be raising first in, but I don't want to start making those kind of conclusions this early, just only a couple orbits in. He checks to me on the 10-5-4 board. I'm going to go ahead and stab for half pot. We have a little bit in the way of backdoor straight draws and an overcard to bail me out if my stab doesn't work. And he check calls. The turn is a 5, pairing the middle pair on the flop and putting a backdoor flush draw out there to go with the original flush draw. I'd be using overbets or checks in this situation, and I don't want to be overbetting a random airy hand like Jack-8 with no real robust equity draws. I'd much rather check this back and try to value better bluff catch on a pair, or perhaps even turn the hand into a bluff if it bricks out again. River is that 4, pairs another card on the flop, so now it's a double paired board and the flush draw completed. I've got Jack high. Really can't show down Jack high here, so I'm going to go ahead and put in a river bluff. I don't think this is going to work a very high percentage of the time. I think it's going to be slightly more profitable than just checking and showing down Jack high, essentially surrendering the hand. Upper left-hand table will raise Queen-9 suited first in from the cutoff, part of about a 28% raise first in range. We get check 2 by the big blind, and the King-10-6 rainbow flop will go ahead and range bet small. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind, will open with 10-7 suited. It's a very standard hand to open in that situation. We get 3-bet by the big blind. It's a little bit too weak to go ahead and defend that, so we're going to go ahead and let that one go. Upper right-hand table, or upper left-hand table rather, we're going to go ahead and continue barreling with this using the overbet or check size on that 6 turn that puts a backdoor flush draw out there and pairs the bottom card on the flop. Keep doing this with my 6x, my 10's full. I might trap with my kings full and quad sixes. And also that a lot of, but not all of my flush draws and a lot of my open enders and some of the gut shots. Upper right-hand table, we raise King Jack first in from the cutoff, part of about a 28% raise first in range. Now on the upper right-hand table, we'll again open this time for middle position with pocket sixes, using a roughly 21% raise first in range. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind, we'll open 10-9 offsuit. Open about 45% in that spot. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise the button first in with King Deuce suited, using about a 44% raise first in range there. Lower right-hand table, the big blind calls and checks to us on the King-King-3 rainbow flop. We'll go ahead and range bet small there. We do have trip kings, but with the worst kicker. Very likely going to check that hand back on the turn unless I happen to fill up with a deuce. They have some good, strong called-on hands, like some various trip hands in my check back line, and some of the weaker ones are better candidates for that. Whereas we want to start getting full value with the stronger trips. Lower left-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. I was planning to isolate him from the button with my King-9 suited, but another player beat me to that by popping him up to $6 from middle position. Against that spot, I'm just going to be playing 3-bet or fold, and I don't need to be 3-betting as many hands or as weak of hands as King-9 suited. In that particular spot, I'd probably 3-bet something like 8%, something like pocket nines or better, most of my suited broadways, but not all of them. Ace-Queen, King-Queen. Ace King, Ace Queen, King Queen, and maybe Ace 5 suited, something like that. Got a 3x open from middle position on the upper right-hand table. We don't need to be defending with hands as weak as Jack 5 suited for that size and that formation. Upper left-hand table, we get a short stack player limping on the cutoff. We would isolate him there pretty aggressively, but not with a hand like 7-6 offsuit. Use something like the cutoff raise first in range to isolate him there. About 28%, I think that's more than sufficient. Lower right-hand table, get a 2.5x open from middle, or from the cutoff rather. You can go ahead and defend that with our offsuit broadways. That short stack fish type player on the upper left-hand table opens to 3x. We've got pocket jacks from the cutoff. We're just going to go ahead and 3-bet that and get it in against him. Nothing else to really talk about or do there. Just 3-bet and get that in for a player playing 40 bucks deep, 20 blinds deep. Lower right-hand table, the cutoff player checked back on that monotone flop. I'm going to go ahead and start stabbing small. I do have top pair, and I do have a middling spade, a middle spade to go with it. Upper right-hand table, we get a 3x open from middle position, and the cutoff goes aheads and calls. You could 3-bet this as a squeeze, or you could flat it. It's pretty close. I think 3-betting probably means you have a few too many hands in your squeeze range. I'm content to just go ahead and call this one and play multi-way against these two guys with King-9 suited. Let's see here. I really don't call very much out of the small blind, but against a fish that's too, it's just hand. I don't want to fold against that fish. I don't want to 3-bet and call it off or 3-bet and fold it. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and call it against that guy and just plan to make either a good pair or good draw on the flop and go with it instead. On that 5-4 deuce with no draws or backdoor draws, that's the antithesis of the kind of flop I was looking for with this hand. So I'll just go ahead and check fold it, especially against that pot size bet. Recreational player limps from middle position on the upper left-hand table. The 7-6 suited probably a little bit thin to isolate him with here from the cutoff, especially given that he's short. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that one. A lot of players would pop that up there. I think that's a bit too loose. It's probably defensible. It's probably pretty close, but I think folding is going to be a little bit better than isolating there. If the other players at your table are just never 3-betting you and letting you get away with isolations like crazy, then you can start ramping it up and get away with murder. But I think it's probably going to play a bit better as a fold. The fact that the recreational player is so short further tilts it towards fold. As I'm going to get into a pot that's already bloated from a limp and an isolation pre-flop, I'd prefer to be playing with the guy that's deep stack when I've got a hand like 7-6, so I can actually get paid off if I make something speculative with it. I'm going to swap out the upper right-hand table. Everyone except the 3 seat directly across from me seems to be playing very much like a reg, and even he is not playing that poorly, the suspected recreational player. He's got some limps and he's playing 27-8, so clearly not a serious player that's playing a tight aggressive preflop strategy. But he's also not splashing around real bad like a true loose passive fish like I see at some of the other tables in the games right now. I think there's just probably a little bit juicier tables available to me based on what the other 3 look like at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and take the chance on finding a better one and shuffle that one out. Lower left-hand table, recreational player limps the cutoff. The button goes ahead and isolates him up to 3 blinds. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet out of my big blind. I'm going to just treat this a lot like it's a small blind versus a cutoff type situation. Going to go ahead and 3-bet the pocket tens. 3-bet about 10-11% in that spot there. Maybe 8s or better, suited broadways, ace queen, ace king, king queen, a few wheel aces, maybe ace 9 and 10-9 suited, something like that. The limping player goes ahead and calls, and then the isolating player folds out. I get an ace-jack-9 monotone flop. I'm going to go ahead and check range on that monotone board to the in-position player. Lower right-hand table, I'm going to go ahead and raise ace-queen under the gun. Lower left-hand table, he checks back. Turn is the king of spades. I have the second nuts now with the 10 of spades. It's a very good card for me. Only thing it's probably the best card in the deck for me, as a matter of fact. Only thing I'm worried about is the queen. I'm going to go ahead and continue checking. Look to either call down if he starts bluffing or stabbing at this pot and maybe try to get some value on the river. It's probably pretty hard for him to have too many lower spades that want to call multiple streets. You have to have something like pocket 8s or some kind of 8 or 7 or 6 of spades, something like that. He bets small. I'm just going to check call. Check to him again on the river. Upper left-hand table, the recreational player limps. Will isolate him this time with king 10 suited from the cutoff, using about a 21% range, something like our middle position raise first in range. He goes ahead and bets small, about 20% a pot on the river. We have the second nuts. Just going to go ahead and call that down. He's got queen 8 for queen high, no spade. So we pick off the bluff there and pick up a few extra blinds from just letting him bluff. We get limp re-raise small after the big blind also calls another suspected recreational player who's been playing short and limping. You know, for this sizing against a player with any appropriate money behind him, I would of course call, but because he's so short and he's putting in half a stack like that, I'm not really all that sure that I'm in great shape. If I get a king or 10 high flop, I'm just going to go ahead and fold that there against that screwy pre-flop small limp re-raise action. He really ought to just limp jam if he's going to limp raise at all, but who knows what he's thinking when he's taking all kinds of weird limp lines and playing 30 blinds deep. And ugh. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise King 10 offsuit from the middle position, using about a 21% raise first in range in that spot. Big blind calls us and checks to us on 7-4-3 rainbow. We do have the relevant 10 of clubs in our hand. We're going to go ahead and range bet that small. Again, Ignition is telling me I don't have enough of a balance to add another table, which is patently false, but that's where we're at. Lower right-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. I'm going to look to raise up out of the blinds with hands like Ace-9 suited. This is one of the weaker hands in the isolating or raising out of the blind range, but still worth doing. Raise them up to about 10 here. Do about an overbet, so to speak, about 150% of the pot. He calls. We get an Ace-4 deuce two-tone flop. We're going to go ahead and range bet that small. He quickly folds. Blind down blind, lower right-hand table. We'll raise Jack-9 offsuit first in. Raise about 45% in that spot, absent a good reason to deviate. Under the gun opens 2.5x. We're in the button with Ace-Jack. This is pretty close. I lean towards folding this, but it's very, very close. I'd raise between 8 and 9%, something like that. And I usually would fold Ace-Jack, but I don't hate a 3-bet. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise Ace-10 suited first in from the cutoff, raise about 28% in that spot. Get called by the big blind. We get an Ace-King-Queen monotone flop. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. We do have top pair. We do have the gut shot. We do not have any relevant hearts in our hand. We get check raised. I don't think players are really check raising these monotone flops all that often. I also think I really can't start calling down too many later bets on future streets. He has been aggressive for whatever extent we put a lot of faith in the HUD stats so far. I think the more mature move is just go ahead and fold this. It's probably a little bit too tight at optimal, but I just don't know that I'm going to get this hand to the river often enough to realize whatever equity I do have. And I don't have any kind of hearts to help me either. It's close, but I'll fold. Hey, there we go. Here's another table. And we get immediate position to a player playing short, so that's a promising start. Try to replace this lower right-hand table as well now. Get a min raise blind on blind. I fold very little in this spot. I defend about 90%, but a hand like ace three or 8-3 offsuit's the exact kind of hand I will find a fold even against a min raise blind on blind. Lower left-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. We'll isolate from the button with ace-9 offsuit using something like our cutoff RFI range, about 28%. Probably about the worst ace in my range here, my worst offsuit ace at least. I would do that with all the suited aces as well. Get a queen jack 9 rainbow flop. He leads into me for 2/3 of pot. I'm going to go ahead and fold this particular hand for that size on that board texture. If the board was less coordinated, I wouldn't be folding third pair, or if I had a king, a 10, maybe even an 8 in my hand, something that gave me some outs to a more lock-type hand, I would continue at least once. But there where I just am probably already pretty far behind that larger size of the donk lead and no real great ways to improve to a real strong hand, I think it's okay to just get out of there early. Upper right-hand table, the player limps at me blind on blind. I popped him up with queen 9 offsuit, and he checks to me. I'm going to go ahead and range bet small on the jack 7-6 two-tone flop. And keep barreling on 8s, 10s, queens, kings. He check calls. Turn is a 7, pairing the board. I don't pick up any equity. I don't have any cards that make me a real strong hand where I'm trying to get all the stacks in on the river. However, the queen or the 9 are potential value bets or bluff catch type hands, so I think they play really nicely in the check back line. I'm going to go ahead and check back and look to bluff catch or value bet if I hit, or bluff if I stay with queen high. He leads into me for full pot on the river. I've got queen high. It's a very easy fold. And he shows up with 7-9 for the trips on the turn. For right-hand table, blind down blind, we can raise ace-4. Raise about 45% first in, blind down blind. Lower right-hand table will raise the button first in about 44%, including, of course, our pocket tens. We get 3-bet by the big blind. With ace-4, we can just go ahead and fold. No reason to 4-bet bluff that. We got better candidates for that. No reason to go ahead and defend with the call. Lower left-hand table, we open ace-king suited under the gun, part of about an 18% range. Lower right-hand table, we get a king-jack-9 two-tone board. I'll go ahead and range bet small. Get a min raise and then a min raise back. I've got king queen offsuit, so I'll just get out of the way of whatever donk on donk violence is about to be unfolding before our eyes. On the upper left hand table, upper right hand table, we'll open the button with ace king offsuit first in. We use about a 44% range there. The big blind calls us and checks on the 7-3 deuce two-ton flop. We do have the ace of diamonds for the backdoor flush draw, so we'll go ahead and range bet small. Lower left-hand table, get a min raise from an under-the-gun short stack. It calls by a couple in position players. We can close the action with 10 deuce suited, so we'll go ahead and do that for that min raise. And then we'll check. Upper right-hand table, the turn is an 8. We still have ace-king high, some degree of showdown value. We're going to go ahead and check this back. I'd rather be continuing to barrel, once again, using overbet sizes if I'm betting, otherwise checking back. The hands I would be barreling would be stuff with draws, draw to real robust type hands, good straight draws, good flush draws. Ace-king, I'll just go ahead and check back. Pretty decent river for us in that the 7 already beat us, and another 7 doesn't hurt us any and makes it... it makes it harder for him to have it. He goes ahead and bets quarter pot. I am not folding this to that. There may be some merit in trying to bluff raise him off it, but ace-king high's got so much showdown value. I think I'd rather bluff raise hands with no showdown value here and just take my showdown with ace-king high. He's got pocket 5s. I don't know if I fold him off it. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But for that small a size in that particular line with the low board staying low, he's going to have so many whiffed over cards that check called the flop and then have to bluff the river that I think it's going to be okay to show down your ace-king high there, even against a small bet. Get a limp and an isolation from middle position. I've got king 8 suited on the button. I'll just go ahead and fold. I don't need to be 3-betting that many hands to 3-bet that particular one. Probably 3-bet about 8% in that particular spot. Upper right-hand table, get pocket aces. We'll raise them under the gun using about an 18% raise first in range. Lower left-hand table, middle position, we'll raise queen 10 suited first in, part of about a 21% raise first in range. And we get moved effectively all in here by a player playing about 11 blinds deep. We can go ahead and fold the queen 10 suited against that 3-bet when it comes back around to us. Get a min raise from the cutoff on the upper left-hand table. We can go ahead and defend that with the 4 deuce suited. We also have that small blind player in there coming along. Get the very familiar scene on the lower left-hand table. The recreational player limps, and then the player immediately behind him isolates him to 3 blinds. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet that with ace-queen offsuit. Be doing that with about a 10% range here. Now the recreational player calls the raise and the re-raise, and the isolating player folds out. We're going to go ahead and range bet him small on the queens or the ace-6 deuce rainbow flop. Upper left-hand table, everyone checks back the flop. I'm going to go ahead and start stabbing with my weak pair there on the turn. The in-position player folds up, but the out-of-position player calls me. I'm going to continue betting in the river. I'm betting this as a bluff, trying to fold him off. A 10, a king, some other pair that beats my 4. We get check raise the minimum, and now we can just go ahead and fold. Recreational player has left that lower left-hand table, so we're on our way out as well. In the meantime, the cutoff raises first in 3x. We're going to 3-bet from the button about 12%, including our ace-jack offsuit. Use a range like pocket 7s or better, suited broadways, suited wheel aces, ace-jack plus king-queen, then maybe hands like ace-9 and 10-9 suited to get you to about 12%. Calls us. Lower right-hand table, a button player on a half-stack limps. We're going to go ahead and isolate him up there with the ace-10 suited out of the small blind. Cutoff player defends our 3-bet on the lower left-hand table, then checks to us on 10-7-3 rainbow, so we'll go ahead and put in a small range bet. Lower right-hand table, our isolation raise got called and by 2 players, both of whom in position, so we're going to be checking range to both players. We do have an open-ended straight draw, backdoor flush run, and overcards, so we've got a pretty decent hand to work with initially. Upper right-hand table, we raise queen jack from the cutoff, and against the big blind, we're going to go range bet small on the ace-5-3 two-tone. Get a small 1/3 bet from the in-position player there. I'm just going to go ahead and raise this up and get it in against him. I'm going to go ahead and check back the ace-jack, looking to peel one of those overcards and value bet the river if I do. Upper left-hand table, we turn that jack second pair, so we'll just try to move this hand towards showdown. We'll check again. Now on that 4 straight run, I'm going to go ahead and just use a pot-sized bet as a bluff. I'm not going to try to show down my ace-high. I'm going to try to fold him off a marginal pair or a better ace-high. He quickly folds. I did want to swap this table out, but Ignition is already signaling to me that it's going to give me a hard time about replacing the table and rather keep this table than no table, so we're going to stick around for a little while. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise the button first in with Queen 7 suited using a 44-ish% raise first in range. Big blind calls us. And on the 6-5-3 two-tone flop, he checks to us. I'm going to go ahead and range bet small. You have a gut shot, a backdoor flush draw. There's a variety of cards I can keep betting on. Lower right-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. I'm going to isolate him from middle position using something like my under the gun raise first in range, about 18%, of course, including pocket queens. Get called by the big blind and the limper, and we get an ace-3 deuce two-tone flop, so I will be checking back my queens on that board, assuming it checks to me. I'd be betting my set small. Guess I wouldn't really have any straights here. I wouldn't have 5-4. I would have some various flush draws. Could bet those small as well. I could bet my decent aces, probably ace-10 or better. Turn continues checking to me. I'm going to go ahead and start betting at that turn small now with my pocket queens. Like using the small sizes when the board is multi-way, it just puts much more pressure on their defense ranges. Upper left-hand table, a short stack player with about 15 blinds raises to 3x. I'm just going to go ahead and pop him up and get this in with the ace-king. The small blind called the small bet, then checks to me. I'm just going to show down my queens at this point. We got value against pocket fours a little bit on the turn. He jams all in. We quickly call off with our ace-king. We're against king-jack suited, so we have him dominated. And we don't get to see the river as the software is hanging up on us for a little bit here, but such is life in the Ignition poker streets. There's that last card. Our ace-king high is good over his king-jack high. And sooner or later, that pot should be pushed towards us. Lower right-hand table, we have a min raise from the cutoff. The small blind, that weak recreational player calls it. We've got queen-jack offsuit. We're going to go ahead and defend that as well, especially because we closed the action. And we'll check range to that small cutoff player that was the initial raising player. Checks around, and the turn is another ace, pairing top pair. We're going to go ahead and start stabbing at that pot with our gut shot using the small size because we're multi-way. Planning to follow through on the river, whether we hit our jack or whether we whiff out. This might even be a candidate for an overbet bluff on the river just because we block the best possible aces. We block ace-queen and ace-10, so two of the best possible aces. We don't block the flush draws that could be out there in any way, shape, or form. I may just use a standard size, but this would be a spot where that hand could be turned into an overbet bluff as well, just based on some of the removal properties that we're dealing with. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise the button first in with queen 9 offsuit towards the bottom of a roughly 44% raise first in range. And our little tiny bet gets min raised. I don't really think that he's doing that too lightly with that other player out there. Players also don't seem to be particularly aggressive against these small bets on the turn from what I've seen in mass data samples either. That said, I'm somewhat suspicious that he really has anything but like a king or a weak ace that's just trying to get the showdown. So there's some merit to repotting this as a bluff. I'm not going to get too wild because we were multi-way, and I just don't think he's going to start doing too much spazzy stuff with that weak player out there. But I'm a little bit suspicious, and I am at least thinking about what kind of hands I want to turn into a bluff there in the event I do want to have them in my range. Upper left-hand table, we're just going to go ahead and put in the range bet after the big blind checks to us on that ace-king 4 two-tone flop. Turn is the jack of diamonds, putting the second flush draw out there. We now have a gut shot to the straight and removal to the nut straight. I'm going to go ahead and use overbet or check sizes. I'm going to be going ahead and overbetting this particular gut shot because I do have some spade draw blockers going on here as well. I check back some of my gut shots and overbet the other ones. And that's a reasonable way to sort them and sort of divide them between your two ranges. And he quickly folds to that overbet on the turn. Three X open from the button, we'll just go ahead and fold the Jack 6 offsuit. The lobby says the games are down for maintenance, so the games are clearly running, and it's not really letting me reload my chips either. The struggles with the software continue. Upper left-hand table, button raises 2.5x. We're in the small blind. I can go ahead and 3-bet with more or less all my suited aces. I'm going to go ahead and pop him up with the ace-8 suited. We get called. Queen 6 deuce, two-tone flop. It's a fine flop to go ahead and range bet, so we're going to go ahead and range bet that one small. We get called. Turn is the 9. I've got some Jack 10 in my range. I've got various club draws. No need to be bluffing with ace high here with no real robust equity, so I'll go ahead and check. Upper right-hand table, we're going to isolate that cutoff limper from our button using something like the cutoff raise first in range, including ace 10 offsuit. He bets, and he bets a pretty healthy size on the turn here. I'm just going to go ahead and check fold my ace high. We get moved all in for about 15 blinds from a cutoff short stack. We can fold our queen 10. On the upper right-hand table, the limping player calls our isolation raise. We get a queen 8-6 two-tone flop. I'm going to go ahead and put in my small range bet. And he quickly folds. Blind on blind, upper left-hand table, we'll open the Jack 4 suited. We'll open in about 45% in that spot. Jack 4 suited right around the cusp of hands you should be opening. Button in that same table will open about 44%, including suited kings like King 6 suited. Or at least in theory, we're going to do that. We get quickly 3-bet, or at least it appeared to be quickly based on the lag, from the small blind player. This is a spot where the player pool tends to be pretty aggressive, but this guy over several orbits, 73 hands, has not been 3-betting very aggressively. Although I guess we don't really know that. We can go ahead and defend this. In the ace-6 deuce two-tone flop, I'm content to go ahead and check that back. I don't want to be check calling against weak aces and stuff like pocket jacks, pocket tens that didn't want to bet the flop. I'm content to move this a bit closer towards showdown. Lower left-hand table, get a 2x open, a min raise from middle position. We're going to go ahead and pop him up from the button with our ace-10 suited. Free betting about 10-11% in that spot. I'm just going to show down my 6 here. Yeah, and against a weak ace, I was really never moving him off. Maybe if I tripled and forced him to put his whole stack in, but you probably should have tried to sneak a value bet in there somewhere, maybe by the river. But I'm content to play it the way we did. Upper left-hand table, we raise Jack-10 offsuit from the cutoff, first in. In position player 3-bets us. I will just fold that one out of position. Middle position, the upper left-hand table, we'll raise 7s first in, using about a 21% raise first in range. Short stack calls out of the big blind on ace-queen 6. He checks to us. We'll go ahead and range bet him small. Blind down blind, that short stack limps, we'll just check in. We don't need to be raising his many hands, his hands like ace-5 offsuit. He checks the flop on ace-7 deuce. We will, however, go ahead and stab for the minimum at that point. He calls, turn is the 5. No reason to be barreling and bluffing with that. We've got so many other whiffed cards. I'd rather be doing this with 6-8, 6-4, 8-9, various heart or diamond draws. The hand like a middling pair, I think I will just check it back and hit trips on the river and look to get paid. He checks again, so now we'll go ahead and put in a bet. He played that pretty fine, just happened to run into me getting lucky by banging off backdoor trips with the 5, which he really can't give me credit for. His river call was good. I would be bluffing all kinds of air that checked back the turn there as well and not giving up. Though I guess I could also have some, well, I guess my ace-x pretty much all raises pre-flop. It's very hard for me to have value on that river. Middle position raises 2.5x. 3-bet from the button about 10%, but not all my wheel aces. Probably ace-5 and ace-4 and fold ace-3 and ace-deuce. Get a limping player from the cutoff in the lower left-hand table. Small blind folds. We get to play him heads up no matter what he does. We are going to go ahead and raise up out of the big blind, though, with a hand like king-jack offsuit. Probably do that about 13% of hands. We get a queen-jack 8 two-tone flop. I'm going to go ahead and check range on a board that coordinated in this particular spot. Upper left-hand table, I'll open middle position about 21%, including king-9 suited. The in-position player stabs for half pot, I'm going to go ahead and check call with my second pair. Continue checking to him. Upper right-hand table is short stack, min raises blind on blind. We'll defend that with 7-6 offsuit. He continues betting, bets half pot again. I'm going to go ahead and continue calling with my second pair, as it's a lot harder for him to have the trips now, and I will continue checking. Oh, and we got value town by a slightly better jack. We're going to go ahead and stab for half pot with our bottom two pair on the king 6-7 in that blind on blind spot in the upper right hand table. Upper left hand table against the imposition 3-bet will fold king 9 suited. Upper right hand table, we can complete the small blind with that limper on the button with the 7-5 suited. And we'll check range out of the small blind. Turn is the king of hearts. We don't really have very much going for our hand, but nobody showed any desire for this pot, so I'm going to start stabbing that at small multi-way, see if we can thin the herd or maybe pick it up on the river. Big blind folds out. Button comes along. River is the queen of hearts, or the queen of diamonds, rather, putting the 4 straight out there. I am going to continue bluffing. I'm going to use a pot-sized bet on that 4 straight run out. He's got 9-10, so he's got the exact kind of hand that wants to call down with, but I'm okay with the play. We're sure not surrendering on the river, that's for damn sure. The ignition hiccups and lagouts continue. Cutoff on the lower left-hand table will raise about 28%, including queen 10 suited. A weak small blind player calls. We get a king jack 3 two-tone flop. We're going to go ahead and range bet that small. We do have an open ender. Lower right-hand table against a limp. Jack 8 suited is slightly loose to be isolating with from the cutoff, so I'm going to go ahead and fold that one. I could continue barreling with my open ender here. Because he's so short and because he's obviously weak, I probably have a smidge less fold equity. I think I'm just going to go ahead and check this one back and look to either spike my hand or bluff the river. Upper left-hand table will raise first in from middle position about 21%, including ace-10. He goes ahead and blasts pot, so we're just going to go ahead and fold our queen high. Queen Jack is pretty close. We've got a weak player limping under the gun. I'm going to make a slightly loose isolation and go ahead and pop him up with Queen Jack offsuit. Usually against an under-the-gun limper, I'll isolate something like my under-the-gun raise first in range when I'm in middle position, about 18%, and Queen-Jack is usually just outside of that range, but right on the cusp. Opted to play at this time, looking to get involved in the pot with that weak short stack player. Get called in position M by the limper, so I'll be checking range and that 8-3 deuce rainbow flop. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind, the small blind limps and then checks to me on 10-6-8, so I'm going to stab for the minimum with my Jack 3. Get led into for a small size by the small blind, or by the limping player rather, on the lower right-hand table. I'm going to go ahead and fold that with nothing really going on for that hand, and the player sandwich behind me that could raise or call and deny some equity from me. Had hit check to me, I was going to start stabbing with pretty much everything in that spot, looking to pick up that pot that nobody's shown too much interest in so far. But the under the gun limping player beat me to it. Blind on blind, a short stack player limps upper left-hand tail. We're going to go ahead and pop him up with the Queen 5 suited. Using something like our button raise first in range. I think I'd isolate limpers about 44% there. Get a limp and then an over limp from the button over here on the lower left-hand table. I'm going to go ahead and pop them both up with the King-Queen offsuit, using about a 13% range there. Pocket 8s are better suited broadways, Ace-10 plus, King-Jack plus. Any 2 cards 9 or higher that are suited. A range something like that seems pretty reasonable. Small blind, blind on blind, 8-4 suited, a little bit outside of standard open range for me. Lower right-hand table, get a 2.5x open from the button. We're going to go ahead and defend that with our offsuit broadways like Queen-Jack. We check range to the in-position player on the 10-9-7 two-tone flop. The continuation bets, it looks like about 2/3 or 75% or so of the pot. I'm going to go ahead and check call that with my open-ended draw. And check again on that jack that also closes the flush. The turn is the deuce of clubs. It puts a 4 flush out there. Trying to decide if I want to go ahead and turn my hand into a bluff. I think I will just try to take the showdown with the jack here instead. I'm never folding the high clubs. I'm not sure how many low clubs are out there that I fold out. The real risk is I give him a chance to bluff me off on that board with the hand that I could have gotten to fold. So perhaps that might be an argument for turning that hand into a bluff. I think it's pretty close with top pair. Although with the 4 straight and 4 flush out there, perhaps I probably should have abandoned the showdown value with my particular hand and just turned my hand into a bluff. On our left-hand table, we'll raise pocket 8s under the gun, part of an 18% raise first in range. Small blind calls us. And the recreational player big blind does as well. Get a king 5-4 rainbow flop. Probably need to check back against that 2/3-ish type lead from a reg-looking type player multi-way. I'm just going to go ahead and fold my pocket eights. Blind on blind, we limp, and I check back my Jack-4 off. He checks to me on the Ace-Queen-3 two-tone. I'm going to go ahead and stab for the minimum at this point. We get check raised. Get check raised for pot. We can just go ahead and fold Jack-4. Jack-9 offsuit just outside of standard defense range from a 2.5x cutoff open up there on the upper right-hand table. Lower left-hand table will raise the button first in with about 44%, including 10-6 suited. One of the weaker hands in the raise first in range, but still reasonable to open. Upper right-hand table, blind on blind, will raise first in about 45% for a 3x open, including 10-9 offsuit. Big blind calls. We will check range to him on the Ace-9-4 two-tone flop. He checks back. We're going to go ahead and start stabbing at the turn small. River is the 8. I'm trying to decide if there's really a lot of merit in I think I'm going to go ahead and get kind of mergy and put in a bet here, even though I'm not going to get called by worse all that much. I got called by a slightly better queen. That's a shame. Lower left-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. Will isolate from middle position, like something like our under the gun, raise first in range, including pocket eights. Upper right-hand table, got a cutoff recreational player limp. Will isolate with something like our cutoff, raise first in range, about 28%, including queen 10 offsuit. And then we get check jammed or limp jammed on, and we'll fold our queen 10. Up against ace queen, so it was a good fold. Under the gun opens 3x. We're going to 3-bet him about 7-8% from the cutoff, including pocket nines. Upper right hand table will raise under the gun with Ace King offsuit about an 18% range. We've got a cutoff limp and then the button isolate to 3x. We're going to go ahead and pop that up from our big blind with about 10%, including a couple wheel aces like ace 5 and ace 4 suited. Upper left hand table will raise the middle position first in with about 21%, including ace 8 suited. Lower left-hand table, we get a 7-5-3 rainbow flop. I'm going to go ahead and range bet this small. My particular hand does have an overcard, a backdoor flush draw, and a double gut shot. On the upper right-hand table, we get 3-bet in position to 18. We've got ace-king offsuit. We're going to go ahead and 4-bet the call off with queens plus ace-king in this spot, and maybe use a hand like ace-queen offsuit as my 4-bet bluff for balance purposes. Lower right-hand table, get what a presumed recreational player limping middle position, small blind completes. We're going to isolate up about 150% of pot with a hand like king-jack offsuit. Lower left-hand table, blind down blind, we're going to raise the kings first in. Upper right-hand table, get a really weird flop for a 4-bet pot. King, jack, queen, two-tone. I am going to go ahead and range bet that small because I've got kings, queen, aces, ace, king, and ace, queen. But he could also have hands like queens or jacks in his range as well. He goes ahead and jams. I don't think I can be folding ace king versus that. I'm worried I'm up against a set, but I think I do need to call off here. Yeah, against a set of jacks. Not terribly surprised. He could also have a hand like pocket tens there too. I really don't think he should be raising. I think he should just be calling in position in that big bloated 4-bet pot. But his jam is, of course, obviously fine. Get a 2.5x open from the cutoff, the small blind, a recreational player on a shorter stack calls. We're going to go ahead and squeeze from the big blind with about a 10% range, including the pocket kings, of course. Upper right-hand table, or left-hand table, recreational player limps the button. We're going to go ahead and isolate out of the blinds with about a 13% range. Pocket eights plus, I need 2 suited cards, 9 or higher, ace 10 plus, king jack plus. Get a jack 9-7 rainbow flop. I'm going to go ahead and check range on that particular board. He goes ahead and jams. I was thinking about check jamming myself against a smaller size, but against an instant jam, I've got no choice but to go ahead and check fold. He shows up with 2 pair. My range check saved us a bet. Blind on blind, lower left-hand table will raise queen 4 suited, put up about a 45% raise first in range. The big blind calls us. We'll check range on the 10-5-4 rainbow board. He goes ahead and he bets small. I'm going to go ahead and use this particular combo as a check raise. The 4 is a pretty good card. The queen is a good card, and then I've got these backdoor, and I've got the backdoor flush draw as well. Having picked up hearts, I'm going to continue barreling with my hand. Lower right-hand table, going to raise under the gun with Jack 10 suited, part of about an 18% raise first in range. Blind on blind, lower right-hand table, Jack 3 suited, a little outside of standard open range for me. Lower left-hand table will raise the cutoff first in with 9-7 suited, part of about a 28% raise first in range. Lower right-hand table will raise the cutoff again with a 28% raise first in range, this time holding ace-king. Get called by both the small blind and the big blind. Get led into by the big blind for half pot, so we'll go ahead and fold. Lower left-hand table, raise about 18% under the gun, including ace-10 offsuit. Upper left-hand table against that middle position limper, it's a little bit loose to isolate from the cutoff with 7-6 suited. Pretty close, but I don't like it as much against a shorter player. Upper left-hand table, raise under the gun with about an 18% raise first in range, including Queen 10 suited. Lower right-hand table, recreational player limps middle position. I will check in from the big blind with Queen Jack offsuit. That's pretty close. In isolation, certainly can't be too bad. I think it's a little bit better as a check, but I prefer to check it as opposed to raise it. We will, however, stab that turn after he checks back the flop and get an open ender on that 10-10-9-7 board. He min raises us. I'm going to go ahead and call that with my open ender and 2 overs. Check to him. Upper right-hand table, I'm going to go ahead and range bet small on the Ace-Jack-5 two-tone. We do have the gut shot and the flush draw to go with our queen high. Now he goes ahead and min bets the river. I'm going to try to check raise bluff this particular hand against that. Now we get doesn't work. Our range bet gets check called, then he lead jams for about 2.5 times pot. We've got the second nuts. We're just going to go ahead and call down. He's got 2 pair 5-3, but our queen high flush is good. Get a 3x open from the cutoff on the upper right-hand table. We're going to go ahead and defend our big blind with pocket deuces and check range to the in-position player. Lower right-hand table, get a 3.5x open from a player playing short, only about $135 deep. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet from the button with the pocket kings. I'm going to treat this almost like a cold 4-bet or fold situation. I think I'm going to be raising up pocket 10s or better to stack off in this formation against a shorter stack player. Have about a 50-50 ratio of value bets to bluffs, maybe a little bit more. Most of my suited broadways to get in there is hands I'm going to raise up but fold against the jam, and also hands like ace-queen offsuit and maybe pocket 9s. Lower right-hand table will raise the pocket 8s under the gun, part of about an 18% raise first in range. We'll check range to the recreational player, calling in position on the ace-6-9 two-tone board. Goes ahead and bets pretty close to pot. We can go ahead and check fold our pocket 8s in that spot. Get a recreational player limps. The button pops him up to 7. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet out of the big blind here. Bet about 7.5%, 8%, something like our suited broadways, ace, queen, pocket nines. I think a range like that is pretty reasonable. I'm planning to stack off with, say, pocket jacks or better if he jams on me. If you get called by the imposition player on that monotone flop, 7-5 deuce, I'm going to go ahead and check range. Upper left-hand table, under the gun limps. We're going to go ahead and isolate from middle position with pocket threes. On the lower right-hand table, he goes ahead and checks back. I'm going to go ahead and start stabbing at that turn now. Let's see. What size do I want to use? Probably want to go about 60% a pot. Upper left-hand table, we get a blind-on-blind situation where the small blind limps. We're going to go ahead and isolate him up from the big blind with ace-5 offsuit. Isolate something like our button raise first in range. He limps and then calls, and then the jack-8 deuce two-tone board, he checks to us. I'm going to go ahead and put in a small range bet. And he check jams for $135 into a pot that's got about 14. I think we can go ahead and fold our ace high no draw for that. And he's doing it with jack 10. I don't know if he thinks that's for value or for a bluff, but I do know that I like having direct position on a player that's doing that kind of thing. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise first in from the cutoff with ace-4 suited, part of about a 28% raise first in range. Three bet by the small blind. He's been extremely nitty and passive, only a second 3-bet in 30-some attempts. Well, I would normally defend this both at optimal or against a standard reg. Against a player this tight, I'm going to deviate much more tight than the typical regs would in this pool require me. I'm going to exploit him by folding. That weak limping player that loves to spaz on the flop limps. I've got a great hand to play against him. King, queen is suited. I'm going to go ahead and isolate him. Use something like a standard 28% cutoff raise first in range for my isolation range here. Big blind or cutoff opens 2.5x on the big blind. I can fold ace-4 offsuit versus that. This jack-8 deuce two-tone board, the big blind and the limper both check to me. I'm going to go ahead and check back. I will not be range betting multi-way. I am going to look to shut this session down when the orbit ends. You got that offsuit king on the turn. I'm going to go ahead and start betting at it now using the small bet because we're multi-way. Upper right-hand table, I'm going to raise the blind on blind with ace-9 offsuit. And the big blind calls me. I'm trying to think if this is worth value betting. I think it probably is, just because I'm going to be bluffing so much here, and I don't want to be. I'm not going to have jacks in my range. I'm going to go ahead and try to get some value with my pretty good king here. If I get check jammed, I can hate life and fold. Lower right-hand table will raise under the gun with about 18%, including my pocket nines. Go ahead and check to that imposition recreational player on the king 4-8 two-tone board. He quickly checks back. Turn is the offsuit deuce. I'm going to go ahead and start jabbing at that pot small. King 3 suited just outside a standard open range for me here from the cutoff on the upper right-hand table, so I'm going to go ahead and fold that. He goes ahead and raises me small. I've only got to call 5 into 25, so I am going to do that with the pocket nines and check range to him on the river. Upper right-hand table, got an under the gun limp. I'm going to isolate with something like my under the gun range from the cutoff. Same situation in the upper left-hand table, under the gun limp. So I'm going to isolate from middle position with my under the gun range. Both cases I've got queen 10 of spades. I'm going to isolate, it looks like to be a posting player on the lower left-hand table from the button against his cutoff poster limp. Against that follow-up bet on the river from this recreational player, I'm just going to go ahead and fold my nines. Now he jams into me on the turn for a 2x pot overbet. Somewhat tempted, but I think that's supposed to be a fold. If it was, yeah. I mean, I'm 50-50 if my overcards are live. He probably isn't really doing that with the 6. I think I can actually call this down. My call was correct mathematically speaking, but I didn't spike, unfortunately. But what silly play from these guys all over the board. I wonder if this is the same guy on both tables that I've got these great seats on. Lower left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and isolate that limper, the middle position limper, from our cutoff with something like a 21% range, including the ace-6 of spades. And we get check jammed over here. These guys are slapping me around right now. Nothing I can do about it. And that's about it. Our tables are all done. That's the end of the session. Until next time, thank you for watching my video. This is Charlie Murphy signing off.